Yep.
Let's move over to the Notre Dame defense and talk about the keys there. It was last week. It was just kind of like, hey, just do your thing, do what you do. This week, I think there are some things that this defense has a little bit to prove this week, more so than last week. And the biggest thing is, I would argue the two biggest disappointments for me so far this season has been the play of Riley Leonard and how he's been used. And because they go together, and his play first and foremost is an even bigger problem than how he's used, because there have been some chances for him to make some plays and he hasn't taken advantage of it. The second one is the play of the defensive line. Like the one thing we talked about before the season is you can't have regression. You can't regress. Like, you need to build up areas where you weren't as good, but you can't have regression from returners. You have to be as good or better. And we said if the defensive line is simply as good as it was last year, you've got a top 10 caliber defensive line. They've regressed. They're not only not stopping the run, they're getting gashed even more than they got gashed last year, but they're not having the counter to that, which is creating negatives and rushing the quarterback. They're doing neither of those two things right now. And that's got to get fixed. So you have to be good up front. No one for the rest of the year is going to be afraid of this defensive line ever, at all. Matter of fact, Northern Illinois went into that game knowing that they could, or believing that they could push Notre Dame around, and that's exactly what they did. Well, Purdue averages, I believe, slightly more pounds on average across the board than what Northern Illinois did. And we've seen it late last year. They had 2 300-yard games. Now, they're not a physical run team, guys. They're more of an air raid team, but they've got some size. They will run zones. They're going to try to move you off the ball. You have to be able to handle that. And then number two, you've got to get some pressure on the quarterback. That's a big thing, guys. So the defensive line, Ryan, is my number one key. They have to be good. They have to get back to what they were and what they're capable of being. It begins up front, inside. It begins inside with Mills and Cross. They have to both play a lot better, and then they're going to need to see something from the edges, especially since I would argue Botelho's been good so far. The other end that's been really good probably isn't playing on Saturday, and Josh Burnham. And so some guys got to step up big time. This defensive line has to be good in this game, right?
No, yeah, I mean, the defensive line's just kind of been passive, I think, for the lack of a better word, over the last couple weeks. I mean, they just kind of seem like I don't know, they're just kind of playing the point of attack. They're just trying to wait for plays to come to them and not being like overly aggressive. This team is the 4-star, like left tackle to right guard, are all serviceable football players, in my opinion. Like Corey Stewart was a transfer from Ball State, who's a solid player at left tackle. Gus Hartwig has been there now for 19 years. Like, he's at center, like solid players. The Marcus Bow kid at right tackle, apparently the M is not pronounced, so it's Marcus Bow. He's a good football player, man. Like, that kid, I know some people in the scouting business think that kid could be a top 100 player in April. So they
Ryan,
have
you and
some
I were
talent up
texting
front.
about him when I was putting that all opponent team together.
Yeah.
Because I had him on
Yeah.
I said, what do you think of this kid? I had him on my second team all opponent team. And it's like, if he doesn't get hurt last year, there's a lot more buzz about that kid coming into this season as an all Big Ten preseason player.
And despite him being a junior, a lot of people in the NFL circles are kind of expecting him to be a part of the 2025 NFL draft, which I think kind of speaks volumes to just kind of the appreciation for his game. But overall, man, like, still, even with that in mind, of Purdue being a solid unit up front, or a good unit even potentially up front, Notre Dame should dominate that game in theory. I mean, no interior player should be able to handle Howard Cross one-on-one. They should be able to handle the talent of Riley Mills one-on-one in theory, right? But at the end of the day, we don't profit off of theories. We profit off of practicality, and we need Notre Dame to show up. And I mean, like, where's RJ Open? Like, where are some of these guys, man? Like, there are no shows so far this year. I mean, RJ Open played 10 snaps last week. Like, it's just
because he was so bad.
Yeah,
I mean,
some of these guys need a reality check, man. Like Howard Cross, Riley Mills, RJ Oben, they all came back to school to hopefully raise their draft stock and to showcase how good of a player they are. And all of those players have underperformed at this point. Jordan Botelho is the only one that I've watched, and I've been consistently like, Botelho's playing hard, man. Like, he's playing some pretty good ball overall. And then I obviously, like, a couple backups have had flashes, but overall, this defensive line really needs to hold their weights and to hold up to their reputation, because if they are able to create negatives in the run game and also get after Hudson Card is a good college quarterback, but he's a rhythm-based player. Like, he's an RPO kid. He's a guy that likes to work off of that easy structure. If you mess up his structure and you mess up his process, he could be in for a little bit of a tough day. So the defensive line is going to make or break this football game.
100%. You can't to take that a step further, and I'll make this quick here because I know we're rolling. If you're a coach, if you're the D-line coach, if you're the defensive coordinator, I understand that you had fifth-year guys come back to be a part of this program to help raise their draft stock, but this isn't the NFL draft yet. And if they're not being effective on your team currently, you have to sub them out for somebody else. Don't just keep them in for the sake of saying we're going to keep them in, right? I don't want to say Notre Dame should be rotating defensive linemen every other 2 plays if they don't do one assignment correct thing. But if you're going through an entire first half and your starting D-line is getting pushed back, you have to give guys like Devin Houston and Armel Mukam a look to try to change the pace of something. Because doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result, we all know what that is. So that's another thing that I would be looking for from the D-line this week too.
Let's get to number 2, guys. When you look at the number 2 key for this Notre Dame team is Purdue doesn't do as much pre-snap as Northern Illinois did, but they do enough to where it can create problems. But if I had to guess, Ryan, I would think they're going to ramp it up a little bit this week with what they saw last week. That's a natural part of an air raid offense. I expect them to have a plan to say, look, Notre Dame's linebackers are young. They make mistakes when you start making them think a lot before the snap. Let's try to create some big plays. Notre Dame has to have a better plan this week and a better answer for that type of stuff because you know you're going to see it from Purdue. Because what I don't think Purdue will do, Ryan, is I don't think they're capable, just like I don't think Northern Illinois was capable, of going up and down the field consistently beating you. Northern Illinois had 0 touchdown drives in that game that were methodical. They had 1 touchdown in the entire game, and it was on a 83-yard touchdown pass, right? Everything else was just field goals. If you don't give up that 83-yard touchdown pass, we're disappointed in how the game went on Saturday, but we're still talking about, but hey, you're still 2-0. Right? They know Purdue's the same way. They know they're not going to just go up on a bunch of 8, 9, 10-yard drives on Notre Dame. They're going to need to generate some big plays, which then gets Notre Dame on their heels, and that's when they can then go on the attack and be more physical. So they're going to try to do that early, Ryan. Notre Dame needs a better plan. Here's my first thought, Ryan. You tell me if this is nuts. Maybe today at practice, they should actually have a real Thursday practice. I think that might be something that they do. When you have, I don't know, a bunch of freshman and sophomore linebackers that haven't played a lot of football, they might actually need to work. Just saying. They might actually need to work.
Groundbreaking.
It's a solid thought.
That's why I pay myself the big bucks.
I was just about to say.
I think Purdue has some tricky athletes, and ultimately the air raid under Graham Harrell is designed to create space. Like that's all it is, right? Like you're working with splits, you're working outside leverage, like you're doing those types of things to be able to get your guys in space, hopefully. So, I mean, you're going to see screen game this week a ton. You're going to see RPO game a ton. They have athletes in the sense of like Max Clare, the tight end, could work a seam and could create a big play. Jamal Edrin is athletic enough to create a play both down the field or after the catch. And then the Devin Mockabee kid isn't a great running back, but he is a kid that's leggy and can make a guy miss in space occasionally. And then Hudson Card's a good athlete. So ultimately, Purdue has enough athletes to create some explosives if Notre Dame isn't playing with proper technique, if they're not playing with good pursuit angles, if they're not in the right spots. I mean, the worst rep last week defensively that I remember, and it was highlighted by someone on Twitter, was they threw just like a screen out there, Northern Illinois, or just like a quick hitch, something where there was 2 wide receivers and there was 1 corner and there was
Brian, they lined up in twins.
Yeah.
That's it. Vince talked about this in the post-game show. He lost it. They lined up in twins.
And there's 1 defender out there.
And we're sort of like, and Benjamin Morrison's like, hey, and there's it's not even like they did motion there. They just lined up in twins.
That happened a couple times last week. I mean, you mentioned the touchdown to Antonio Brown. I mean, also, I thought that play was doomed from the start because Kingston was like kind of playing like an apex almost, like he was kind of playing overhang. And then you could see the corner saying like, move out more. Like they were very uncomfortable against being spread out last week. So you're playing against a team that's going to spread you out. Ultimately, like that's an air raid. They're going to spread you out.
Imagine that.
So you're going to have to be good in space. You're going to have to tackle well. You're going to have to be competitive on the outside. You're going to have to stop them from creating any type of explosives.
So let's get to this last couple real fast. I'm just going to kind of hit these through because I do want to get to the predictions. Number 3, first down success is key. You've got to get Purdue off schedule. They're not a team, in my opinion, Ryan, that is going to just be able to drop back with a third down, second and long, third and long, pass game and have a ton of success on Notre Dame. When Northern Illinois had success against Notre Dame, it was on first and second down. It was in normal down and distances. Get them off schedule, be really good on first down. And then the fourth one is Hudson Card's a good football player. I like Hudson Card. He's going to put the ball up in instances where you can go make plays on it, or he'll put the ball on the ground. I mean, you're going to have a couple chances in this game to get the football. You got to get the football. That's really the last one for me. And so those are the last two keys for me on defense. Last things that you guys have on defense before we move on to our predictions.
I mean, I just think that Hudson Card is not a great downfield thrower. I think that's one area that he really struggles with. I know Notre Dame fans, obviously are talking about that in instances from the Notre Dame side, but if you watch it, I mean, Jamal Edgerrin had a wide open touchdown last week and just kind of overthrew him. And that was kind of a consistent thing last year for Purdue. He's a pretty good sound decision maker, short to intermediate, but he isn't a guy that really pushes the ball downfield a ton. So in this instance, don't let that change this week, right? Like we keep talking about explosive plays. Like, do not allow them to create chunk plays in the passing game vertically down the field. I think that Notre Dame just has to play. Like, you can sacrifice 2 safeties this week to get an extra guy in the box to be able to handle the alleys and to be able to handle the run game, because they're just not an explosive passing team. But ultimately, you have to be able to keep the plays in front of you this week.
100%. Eliminate the chunk plays. Against Texas A&M, Notre Dame's defense gave up 0 plays at 20 yards or longer, and they gave up 3 in the first half alone to Northern Illinois. So keep everything in front of you. And to Ryan's point, trust your secondary and the key guys that you have there in Xavier Watson, Ben Morrison, and a young Christian Gray, and help load the box to stop the run if the D-line isn't going to be playing the way they should.